Down said hut. It's a football podcast with Tom, Cody, and Sam. Hello, and welcome to the Midwest Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast, where we break down a Dynasty Sleeper League every single week. I'm here with Sam and Cody, here to break down Week 5 of the fantasy football season. Guys, how's it going?
It's good to be back again. It's another fun week in the books. I'm glad that only one game got postponed, so still going strong.
Yeah, we'll have to see how the season goes going forward. See how many more games we lose. Sam, we're inching there, Sam. You just need 5 more weeks for your playoff chances.
We're inching there.
We're inching there, break by break.
Yeah, it is pretty cool to have Tuesday Night Football happening right now as we speak, as we're recording. I think what was like the first Tuesday Night Football game since 1970.
Yeah, I believe it. I kind of hope we get more of those, like mixing some Saturday night games. That'd be sweet.
Yeah, I'm going to just jump right into our headlines because that's actually going to be a question for you guys. Would you be interested in seeing football more often on more days of the week?
Oh, for sure, because then I can watch more games. You just miss games on Sundays because you can't watch all of them. So yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that either. I would want some days off just because you don't want to get oversaturated with football, but you don't want that hangover either. So
I think that's where you and I are different because I don't get oversaturated with football.
Oh, okay.
Me neither.
Well, I'm on the wrong podcast.
You are on the wrong podcast. Look around the room. Look at me and Sam. We look like addicts.
Yeah.
He's got a white shirt on. You've got like your little black shirt on. I've got I guess I only have a blue shirt on. Wow.
Well, Cody is the most prejudiced in the room.
That's true.
Yeah.
So with that, this week with you guys, we just ran through our headlines, but then we have our trades and pickups analysis followed by our trade tirade for the first time this week. Then we're going to talk about some surprise duds, and you need to stop being crud. That's our next segment, followed by another power rankings update and looking at some positional strengths and weaknesses for each team. And then we're going to end today's episode with talking about the Week 6 matchup preview. So without further ado, I'm going to scroll down to our standings for the Midwest Dynasty Fantasy Football League, which is not the official name because it's like Delt Champlain. But right off the bat, I'm going to start off at the bottom of Division 3, which is currently Mike Reed at 0-4 and 414 points scored. And the way this studs, duds, and you need to be more crud segment is actually going to work is that I'm going to list 2 players that are potential studs, and a stud is defined as someone that has outperformed what we initially thought they would perform for the season, and a dud is someone that has underperformed what we thought they were going to for the season through 5 weeks of the season, and then I'm going to pose a question about those players that's interesting to talk about. So to start off with Mike Reed's team, looking at it right here on our screen that we're showing at 720p, not quite up to 1080p quite yet. I'm going to identify Gardner Minshew and Chase Claypool, Chase Claypool just coming off a 44.6 point week with 4 touchdowns, 11 targets, Deontay Johnson notably injured. But Gardner Minshew has had 5 straight solid games of being in my opinion, top 15 quarterback minimum, QB1, gunslinger. So the question here is, who is more the surprise? And can we move forward with Claypool saying that he's a stud now?
Yeah, to me, it's Claypool. Gardner has definitely exceeded expectations. I would love to have both of them on my team. But Claypool has played so well, you can't go back to not playing him if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? He's been so good. He's produced every time he's been on the field, and he's just looked like a good athlete.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Gardner Minshew went from like a low-end QB2 to being, I guess he's QB12, so you can call him a low QB1 right now, but I'd really call him a high QB1. So while it is an improvement, it's not a great improvement, whereas Claypool literally was, a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, maybe coming into the at best coming into the season. And then I think he's a solid wide receiver 3 right now, and you can make the argument that he could be a low wide receiver 2.
The next player to talk about here is Daniel Jones versus Kerryon Johnson. So Daniel Jones, kind of we expected earlier in the season, I think maybe wanted him to step into the solid QB2 range and hoping that he would make the step up into looking like a QB1. Now, that being said, the Giants have some struggles on offense, and Kerryon Johnson, who is currently on Mike Reed's bench, not just because of his bye, but is pretty much a mainstay of Mike Reed's bench. Maybe expecting him a little bit more to get in the offense, but what do you guys think? Is the surprise dud here more Daniel Jones or more Kerryon Johnson?
Ooh, that one's actually a really tough question. I'm going to say the more surprise for me is Daniel Jones. While I didn't expect Kerryon to do that much this year, I thought he would have a little bit more influence over DeAndre Swift to begin the year and really carrying it. And I didn't see Adrian Peterson really kind of coming in the area either. So, I get that he's low, but I think it was Daniel Jones. This supposed to be the season he took that next step and became the quarterback, everybody wanted him to be when you drafted him that early. And he's just looking bad.
Yeah, I agree. If you talked to me before the NFL draft, before they drafted DeAndre Swift, and you told me that Kerryon was going to play this bad, I would have said him because I actually liked him as a running back. But after they drafted Swift, I think everyone was kind of like, okay, it's going to be Swift's backfield eventually. So you didn't have super high expectations. Daniel Jones did have that expectation that he was going to be at least a solid QB2, and he just has not performed.
Yeah, just to weigh in here a little bit, it is an interesting question because I think that was, if Mike Reed's team was going to be one that was really competitive for a playoff team, he needed both to hit by far. And it's just kind of a bummer that both of those, young players that used to be either touted as something that would turn out, or in Kerryon's case, or I guess in Daniel Jones's case, still young and we're hoping he would step up, they really didn't. So a bit disappointing for Mike Reed on that end. But the wild card question, which couldn't be phrased as "you need to stop being crud," but in this case, I've identified Mike Reed as someone that is not necessarily a team that wants to compete, and we talked about this last week. And so, to continue that vein, I'm going to kind of slant inwards on the question that we keep talking about, that Kenny Golladay and Chris Godwin are clearly we've identified as two people that he needs to trade. So I'm going to ask, between Chris Godwin and Kenny Golladay, who is, if he only gets to trade one before end of season, who is that wide receiver?
To me, it's Chris Godwin. Even though he's younger and he could have a chance to help the rebuild better for him and be a solid option, I think it's the fact that his return is at a very high amount right now, which if he's trying to rebuild, you need assets. You need a quantity of assets, which is what Chris Godwin can acquire you. And not saying Godwin wouldn't, not Godwin. Not saying Golladay can't either. He could, but not to the extent that Godwin can. And I actually think Galladay's in a great position where he's going to continue being that number one wide receiver option, whereas Godwin, don't get me wrong, I still like Godwin. I love Godwin's talents, but I think as we've seen on Tampa Bay, there's a lot of mouths to feed. So unless that changes in the coming years, which I don't know if it will for sure. I mean, I don't see Mike Evans going anywhere. He's going to always be kind of fighting for targets there. So that's my opinion why I would trade Godwin.
Yeah, I think you bring up a lot of good points. To me, I would actually take Golladay, though. And this is kind of depending on what you think of his team and how much he really needs. I'm basing it off of, like we said, we like Claypool a lot. He has a bunch of young prospects that could pan out. I think if you give away Golladay, who you could probably get a couple of firsts from, you can maybe close those gaps, whereas Godwin will still be good for the next 8 to 10 years, probably.
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like I always side with Sam on these arguments, but in this case, I thought about it while you guys were talking, and as a Lions fan, I actually would be looking to move from Golladay more than Godwin. I think Galladay's peak, he is actually surprisingly 26, which is by no means old, but you're talking about once he gets to 29, he's to a point where he might decline, and he's also a player that does not have a for sure quarterback situation going into next year, and he also is someone that, in my opinion, really relies on his height and his ability to just grab balls out of the air. And he's not particularly fast as a player, so he's just going to continue to lose speed and be less and less of a target for the Lions. I'd be looking to trade him personally. So that's Mike Reed's team. Currently sitting at 0-4, the last in the division, and we have ranked him as 11 in our power rankings.
And just to say, he will be 1-4 after this week.
His
sleeper isn't updated yet because of the Tuesday games.
Yes,
he is guaranteed to win, so he will be 1-4.
Mm-hmm. Good point. So moving to Adam's team, Twaler Bernold. Twyler. I missed it last week, and here I am missing it again. So two players really interesting to me. we've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Calvin Ridley. So Calvin Ridley's summary to me is that he was a fantastic receiver last year, but then moved into a situation that this year it really seems like he actually needs Julio Jones on the field to maximize his talent. And then we have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Adam selected him second overall, I think, in our rookie draft. Is that correct? And yeah, okay. And with that being said, CEH is someone that I think we were expecting to maybe take a little bit of time to develop in that offense, but hasn't at all. So who are you more surprised with there being a stud?
I to me, it's definitely Calvin Ridley. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is I believe he's currently in a low RB1, high RB2, which I think anyone that's going to start in the Chiefs offense will pretty much get that. But Calvin Ridley, I mean, he's really overtaken that offense. I think going forward, I was not going to say at the beginning of the year, but at this point, I will say I think Ridley will be better than Julio Jones going forward, which is pretty big for that offense. So he's been very, very good.
No, I completely agree with you. I think Calvin Ridley being able to take that next step. I mean, his rookie year, he ended as the 22nd best wide receiver. In his second year, he ended as the 27th best wide receiver. And I mean, he's already in the top 5 right now. That's a huge jump and leap that Adam needed for his team, especially to go with DJ Moore's slight decline right now. I mean, I don't think he's actually declining, but he's been down a little bit so far. Whereas like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, running backs generally come out of the rookie draft right away and produce. You don't really need to wait. So I think everyone kind of envisioned him here. I mean, people were already almost putting him in like the top 10 for their dynasty running back like categories just because of his playing, or basically because of where he was located at. So I think it's got to be Calvin Ridley.
I firmly agree with what you guys are both saying. And Calvin Ridley is a huge turnout for Adam's team, 100%. Moving into the dud conversation, I've identified that this is between Austin Hooper and, who did I say? DJ Moore. DJ Moore losing a ton of value with Robbie Anderson stepping up. And you'll see this week he actually went 4 for 5 and 1 touchdown with 93 yards. Netted 21 points, but still only 5 targets. And the other side of the coin here is Austin Hooper, who actually recently has 17 targets in the last 2 weeks. So this is going to be 2 questions, but let's start with number 1. Who is the more surprising dud between DJ Moore and Austin Hooper?
I'd say surprising probably is DJ Moore for me. I think Austin Hooper going into kind of a bad situation, which we all kind of saw coming, was the fact that Cleveland, again, has too many mouths to feed. They have so many people that they're trying to give targets to, and I always think the new guy is always going to be the one to suffer from the chemistry side of things. Whereas like DJ Moore was just coming into, being like, is this going to be when he makes the leap to become a dynasty wide receiver number 1? He's proven it in the past. And then now it's like, while he did have a great game this last week, putting up 21 points, there is just the fact that there even has to be a question of who's the number 1 wide receiver on that team is not what you want to see.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think DJ Moore it's pretty scary. And that's what I always hate to see when you're like either a wide receiver changing teams or a team is getting a new quarterback, is like, we all agreed no one really liked Robbie Anderson coming into the year, but he is the wide receiver 1 on the Carolina Panthers right now, and DJ Moore is not. Mm-hmm. And like maybe Teddy just likes him better or something. I mean, DJ Moore can't even produce with or without Christian McCaffrey, which is even more scary. I don't know what's going on, but I'd be pretty scared about him.
Yeah, me too. I 100% agree. And the second part of that question was, I actually did want to identify that we've talked about Hooper a lot on this podcast, but he does have, like I just said before, 17 targets in the last 2 weeks. So I think last week we had said, it's 7, but whatever, it doesn't matter. But now it's 17 in the last 2 weeks. So is that just because they were down to the Colts the whole game, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it certainly could be. I don't know if 2 weeks is enough to pick him back up. I mean, maybe it's enough that we were considering him just like you shouldn't ever start him. Maybe he's back into that tier if he could finish between 10 and 18 or something. But either way, I still don't love having him, but maybe he'll be a moderately okay player.
Yeah, I agree with Sam. I need another week to determine how it's going to go. I mean, if he gets the targets again, especially with Nick Chubb being out, maybe that's the result of that. So there could be so many factors that I feel like I need another week to determine that.
Okay, absolutely. So we're in agreement. I do want to keep monitoring him, and someone that I wouldn't mind talking about every week because it's really important for Adam's team.
Yeah.
So I've identified that in Adam's flex position, he currently has Deion Lewis. However, on the bench, he has 2 very talented receivers in N'Keal Harry and Mecole Hardman. So I'm going to ask the question, Between N'Keal Harry and Mecole Hardman, who needs to step up more, or should I say, who is more likely to step up more for Adam's team to actually be in that flex position?
Ooh, I'm gonna still say N'Keal Harry. I don't think Tyreek's really gonna go anywhere, and I think he's gonna stay the number one wide receiver there. I think N'Keal Harry has a clear opportunity to become the number one wide receiver on the Patriots. And given that opportunity, he needs to take advantage of it for Adam to have that solid number 3 wide receiver, which he needs.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. I think Mecole Hardman at best is going to be the third option on that team, and that's if he outplays Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So yeah, Hardman might be good for a 50-yard touchdown once in a while, but he won't put up consistent weeks like Harry should.
But is it incorrect to say that Mecole Hardman has a higher ceiling only because if Tyreek Hill does get injured, especially with Sammy Watkins having injury history, Mecole Hardman could really turn into a wide receiver too if Tyreek Hill is out?
He could, but I think it's exactly what Sam said. You're still fighting for targets. You're still fighting with Kelsey, who's a huge target right there. And then you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who is also fighting for targets. Not to mention that Patrick Mahomes still uses guys like Demarcus Robinson and sometimes just no-namers just to air it out. I'm not saying he would be bad. I agree he would probably be good, but it would just be a short-term effect until Tyreek is healthy and then comes back, whereas N'Keal Harry, for example, can just solidify that number 1 position on that team and get if he gets like 10 targets a game, which he could, it's like I would want that every time over Mecole Hardman.
Yep, completely agree.
Okay, so N'Keal Harry currently at wide receiver number 64 in PPR, but has the highest likelihood to actually step up for that flex position. All right, that's Adam's team. Let's talk about number 3 currently in Division 3. That is Jake O'Brien at 3-1 with 625 points scored this season. And right off the bat, I want to talk about 2 players. It's really interesting because when looking at Jake O'Brien's team, there aren't that many people that are necessarily surprise studs. We're going to later talk about some more surprise duds. But I want to talk about Aaron Rodgers versus Will Fuller. And Will Fuller is someone that has really stepped up before Bill O'Brien got fired, especially in that offense, and actually with 8 targets again this week in that offense, which was a little surprising with respect to Brandon Cooks being signed. Whereas Aaron Rodgers, the only reason I say he's a surprise stud is I don't think any of us thought he was going to be this much of a stud. So who do we think is more of a surprise?
More of a surprise is definitely Aaron Rodgers to me. I mean, like, this is a guy that I thought was going to be kind of on the decline. I mean, he's an older quarterback, so I think you always expect kind of negative results to occur. So him having a bounce back season is more of a surprise to me. Did you also mention that? Was one of your questions that like who's more likely to continue this pace?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, because I thought you said that too. It's funny because I actually think Aaron Rodgers is also more likely now that I've seen it to continue that pace for what he's doing. I get that he hasn't played great defenses, but looking at Will Fuller right here, I mean, out of 2 out of the last 3 weeks, he's put up 15 points in each one of those games. In each of those games, he also just caught a touchdown. So removing a touchdown, it takes him down to like 9 points. So literally, it's just like a touchdown difference on a couple of those games. And as you know, I don't always like to predict on touchdowns every single game, especially for a wide receiver.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think Aaron Rodgers, he's quietly having a historic season. I believe he's at roughly, 13 touchdowns in 4 games, give or take, and 0 interceptions so far, which is just ridiculous. No one could have ever projected that. Will Fuller's having a great season. He exceeded expectations as well, but I'd much rather have Aaron Rodgers.
Does it say something about the COVID season and the current NFL state that Aaron Rodgers is having a historically great NFL QB season, and he's still only number 7 QB?
Yeah, I think it does. I think defenses, because it's such a team thing, they were really unprepared for quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers. And given like Cody said, he has had a pretty easy schedule. But I mean, you're talking about people like Dak and Russell Wilson, and even Patrick Mahomes is having an elite season too. And Josh Allen. So many quarterbacks are playing so well that it just can't keep up if they would have had a preseason or a full training camp, in my opinion.
The biggest thing to consider with that too, why he's number 7, is running ability. Aaron Rodgers isn't running. at all. He's only passing, which is why he's so low. So historically, as a passer, it does make sense that he could be, having an elite season, but still trailing as far as a fantasy because he's not getting those extra rushing yards. He's not getting those extra touchdown points. All those factors kind of contribute to that.
Yeah, that's just something I've noticed, that if you're not running as a quarterback in 2020, your fantasy value just has an inherently lower ceiling. And second, Sam and I were talking about this actually while watching a game on Sunday, that it does seem that in COVID, we were kind of wondering, will offense beat defense or vice versa with COVID? And offense is beating defense. I mean, it's clear that, to Sam's point, I'm going to quote Sam here. It seems like with defense, one player making a mistake can make a huge difference. Whereas on offense, one player making a positive play can make a bigger difference. So
you could also contribute it to, I can't fully validate this, but I know that significantly there have been less holding penalties on offensive linemen, so they probably have gotten away with it more, would be my guess. I don't think offensive penalties just happen to drop like that. And I think it's becoming more apparent to me that it's tougher and tougher to play defense in the NFL, with penalties like pass interference constantly being stacked against you, especially if they reduce holding penalties. It seems like I would conclude offense just have a huge advantage this year.
yeah, do you prefer that? Do you prefer a more offense-led NFL?
I'm okay with offense if I feel like it's deserved, like within reason. Like to me, it's like if I'm looking, like I've always had a huge issue with the fact that I don't think offensive pass interference is nearly called enough. I think it happens. Like some of the best wide receivers to me just get away with it constantly, and they just do little push-offs. Whereas like a defender like just looks at them or taps them with a hand, and if they're not going for the ball, it's pass interference every single time. So to me, it's kind of frustrating to watch from a fan perspective. But if it's just true offense and it's penalty free, I'm fine with high scoring games.
Yeah. Okay. I'm assuming you don't have any thoughts about that, Sam? Or
Not a whole lot. One quick thing to point out too is that Aaron Rodgers only played 4 games compared to most other quarterbacks played 5. So he points per game, he's 3rd or 4th. But that's still lower than what I would expect based on his season. So I wanted to throw that in.
I am glad you said that because it's less surprising, but still surprising.
Yep, still for sure behind like Russell Wilson, Dak, and I think behind Patrick Mahomes as well.
And we will talk about Dak Prescott later on. Probably going to be the longest segment we talk about. So
Drink one for one of the real boys.
Cheers. 100%.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers to that. And I'll raise my beer on video here. Hey, look at that. All right. Hey.
Not sponsored.
All right. T.Y. Hilton, wide receiver for the Colts. I'm going to take a victory apple a little bit because one of you was shocked. I don't remember who. I think it might have been Cody when I said that he's being taken over in this offense already. He has been taken over in wide receiver 5, or what am I saying? Through week 5. And then we have AJ Green, who is clearly has taken over. And we've talked about each of these guys in the last couple of weeks. So in this situation, I just want to ask you guys, who are you more surprised that has stepped down?
I can take this one first. First of all, give you props because I think it was both of us weren't a fan of that because you basically called it after week 1 and we were like, not yet. But yeah, now at this point, I think Hilton's pretty much done. With that being said, the fact that AJ Green has stayed on the field most of the time and still been this bad, he's still my dud. With the way that Burrow's playing and the talent of AJ Green, I thought he would have been a really good receiver, and he just isn't right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I will give you credit on T.Y. Hilton. Phillip Rivers has looked really bad. Like, incredibly bad. And also, there really hasn't been anybody to actually overtake him, I guess. Like, maybe Zach Pascal has a little bit, but, like, both Campbell and Pittman are injured right now. So there isn't really a guy that I can clearly say has overtaken him. But, yeah, I think... But anyways, getting back to the original point, AJ Green is by far way more disappointing. I think people weren't really expecting T. Higgins to kind of come into his own for like a year or two until he took that over. The fact that he's already taken it over within 5 games is incredible.
It's really just interesting that a lot of these rookie wide receivers have taken over so early. And I have to imagine that in combination with COVID, just related low practice, low preparation, but also just injuries, a lot of these receivers are being put into situations that they're kind of forced to perform. And it makes me wonder do you think in the future, wide receivers that are drafted early will be forced into more high leverage situations earlier on in their career because of what we're seeing so far?
Oh, that's tough to say. I do think that from what we've seen from this wide receiver class, it's one of the best in such a long time. It's like, is that because of the way the NFL is going, or is it because of the talent of this class? And I honestly don't know enough to say.
I can't say for sure. My hypothesis would be that a lot of the guys that we're seeing that are taking over their starting positions, like, and having huge success, maybe weren't a lot of the guys originally taken off, or like they got drafted in really good situations. Where I could see like wide receivers in the future not being drafted into great situations that they can take over. Like the fact that CeeDee Lamb went to Dallas, which was a great situation, and I mean he really fell. But I mean, like, Judy's been good, but not excellent, kind of in there. Henry Ruggs has been good, but not excellent yet. You know, it's been some of those lower guys that were drafted in the good situations that have really taken over.
Yeah, and I think it could be a little bit of both.
Yeah.
That I think moving forward, I really do think that in the same way that we see running backs immediately affect teams, I think we're going to slightly move the needle towards seeing more receivers actually being instant upgrades to teams. Yep. But I also think that it is a huge credit to the class that is 2019, 2020. Yep. It's just ridiculous. And we can maybe that is a segment that we talk about like next week, just how, because if you look at the list of receivers, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Yep.
How many
It's
of them are
crazy.
Shattering records all over the place. It's so fun to watch.
It is. It's really cool. What a fun season, even with COVID. So I'm gonna go ahead and go do for Jake O'Brien's wild card question.
Yeah.
Wild card.
Because just before we hit record on this, not 5 minutes before, we actually had breaking news that Le'Veon Bell, running back for the New York Jets, previously running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and signed to be their, at least 3 or 4 year running back, and we're supposed to propel the Jets offense with Sam Darnold, has been released. So first of all, how does this affect Jake O'Brien's team, and what is the best case scenario for Jake O'Brien?
It's a hit, but I don't think it's the end of the world. He has such good depth at basically every position. I mean, instead of Le'Veon Bell, who does he put in here? Melvin Gordon? Like, okay, it's not the end of the world. He has Henderson and Gaskin on his bench too. It is a hit, but I mean, I think this could be a blessing in disguise, truly, if he goes somewhere better. I don't know exactly where that would be, but if he gets in a better situation, where literally anywhere, in my opinion, other than the Jets, is a better situation.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of really good points. I think for me, it would have been more of a hit if some other people within his division, or one person within his division, didn't also take a much bigger hit along the way this last week. That's where I'm like, oh, okay, I don't actually think it's going to be that big of a deal for him going forward. But I agree. It'll be interesting to see where he goes.
Off the top of your head, who's the best situation for Le'Veon Bell?
I actually read an article about the top 5 teams that he could go to or possibly trade for. One of the number one team, surprisingly, was the Steelers. Was having him actually go back to the place where it all started, where he had all that success. Technically, the money that he's making right now was like what the Steelers were originally offering him. If not, they offered him a little bit more originally, but he wanted even more money than that when he sat out. So it's tough to see if that works out. I think I've also seen a couple of other ones that I didn't really think make sense. Like Buffalo was one,
I don't like
which
that.
I didn't like that one. I didn't like that one either. I want to say I think the other one was like the Falcons. It was just like
either.
it was just kind of ragtag along the way there. But that was the big one I noticed.
What about the Dolphins?
Dolphins would be interesting. I think that'd be a good spot for him, but it seems like they Gaskin decently. Another one I was kind of thinking of, which they probably wouldn't, but New England. They don't really have a guy there. Henderson's been okay, but doesn't seem like a whole lot of teams necessarily need running backs right now.
Yeah, it is. It is a really deep pool, and people are, especially in COVID season, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, they're preferring for sure that committee situation. Mm-hmm. So big news for Jake's team. I'm actually going to move on. Maybe in the future we'll talk about Myles Gaskin versus Darrell Henderson. So Jake O'Brien, second in the division with 3-1 and 625 points. Very, very close to team number 1, who's Ben Fowler.
He will actually be 4-1 and leading the division after this week. Sorry,
no.
It's so confusing.
Yeah, this week's tough for us just because we try to do this when it's final, but it turns out this week it's never final.
Yeah,
No.
Jake had his bye week this week.
Yeah, dude.
Wait, who's that?
Is
He barely beat me.
All right. So now that Jake O'Brien did beat by Holla, he moves into first place. So I'm don't apologize. I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't know that for sure. Then we have Ben Feller, who should have been second and will probably go down in points relative to Obi. I don't know for sure. I don't really care. Let's just talk about. Normally I would start with studs and duds, but right off the bat, I'm staring at Dak Prescott's name with 13 points. And so I'm just going to jump straight to the wild card. And you need to stop being crud. Oh, crap. That just feels crappy to say about Dak Prescott because he is out for the season. I've seen tables of 4 to 6 months for recovery, which means he will be back for 2021. But we'll see how he can fully recover as a mobile quarterback. There's so much to dive into this, but let's just start off with the bat the same way that we talked about Jake O'Brien's team. I mean, what does this do to Fowler's chances?
It destroys it. I mean, like at this point, it sucks that he made that Saquon trade because if both these happened the same week, I almost guarantee he wouldn't have. But at this point, like, what do you do? Do you trade? Because that's his only starting. He only has one starting quarterback now. He only has one. So like, do you just sell all of your future to be like a middling team and try to go for the division? Do you just instantly try to go for a rebuild? Because like Dak will be good going forward. I don't know, but it's absolutely brutal.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing you could do if he wants to still stick to the win now strategy is sell Dak for still a top 10 quarterback right now, but the one that just happens to be underneath him. So essentially, it's kind of like what he did with the Saquon Barkley trade, right? It's the same exact principle because it's like Dak's going to be out. You just like take off the value there, but if he doesn't get a quarterback, he's out of it.
Yeah, he only has Bridgewater, right?
I know.
That's tough.
Unless somehow Jacoby Brissett becomes a starter again, and does well, that's a lot to ask for.
Yep.
Yeah, you have to. It is. I'm glad you brought up that option because I do think, unfortunately, from looking at his team, that is the strongest option to compete is just trading Dak Prescott. Because if you look down at his team, what he's got for draft picks, and I'm showing it on the screen, he got rid of a lot of his draft picks to get to the point of being a competitive team and then lost Saquon Barkley and Dak Prescott. So really, he'd have to go down to 2023 to start trading first-round picks. He could bundle the 2021 second or the 2022 second with someone, but I agree. I guess if we're just straight out saying it, I think Sam would agree with this too. I think his best option would to trade Dak Prescott.
I didn't even think about that, but I think that's by far the best option. That or just full rebuild.
Yeah.
So those are really, because you're not going to get far with one quarterback. Like it's going to be tough. So,
and it's a tough rebuild to try to do too, because I mean you'd still end up having to sell Dak anyways with it. I'd probably Dak and Teddy, and then maybe Kenyon Drake. But man, if you're trying to do a full rebuild, I don't know if you sell DK. I truly don't.
I can keep DK and Chark, and you sell Aaron Jones. You sell.
Oh, I forgot about Jones.
Kenyon Drake, like you said.
Asset,
but
yeah.
I actually think you keep Dak, but yeah, you sell Teddy as well.
Yeah,
so like,
Jones is a big asset that you do sell. I agree with that.
He can do a rebuild if he wants. I wouldn't fault him for going either way. It's just super unlucky that he had both Dak and Saquon go out this year for the entire season.
100% agree.
It's a real bummer.
Yeah, the second option or third option, however you want to look at it, is that he could just go for like a QB3 just to plug in that spot, who still would arguably have more value than someone else in that position. And man, this will be something to monitor. I would love to have Ben, if he would ever want to come on the podcast, to talk about this, because man, this is just terrible.
Somebody needs to teach us.
Yeah, and with Dak Prescott being a top 5 quarterback and Barkley being a top 5 running back, in recent memory, I guess in the history of our league, this is the worst I've seen someone affected by injuries. 2 season-ending top 5 players.
I think the Jamal Charles one a while back was super big, but yeah, as far as a combo effect, I don't know.
Just in the sleeper league.
Yeah.
I mean.
Oh yeah, just in the
like
sleeper
the history
league.
of the last.
And the way it affects their actual team.
Yeah,
I agree. Yep. And that's just with his lack of depth and like just those 2 huge injuries. You literally couldn't choose 2 worst players to get injured on his team.
Yeah.
No.
It does have to be situational based, because I mean, you could argue for Sam losing Christian McCaffrey and Michael Thomas is up there too. But,
and Julio Jones.
But
it's completely situational,
yeah,
right?
it's way,
because my team is still performed, but like his team's kind of shot without those 2 players. So
you can brag about it.
I will. I will, and I have. I'll continue to.
You definitely have. No, and you deserve to in a lot of ways. But moving forward, it's tough to project Dak's outcomes as a dynasty quarterback. I don't think I almost want to say he won't be a top 5 quarterback anymore. It's just because I don't know how you recover from such a major compound fracture. But
I think he could bounce back. I think it's just gonna take a lot of time. So maybe not next year, but going forward, I think he'll be still really good.
Think about Teddy's injury.
Yeah,
very true.
And I mean,
he's looking better than he ever has.
yeah.
So
He still has 2 legs.
That's true.
barely.
That is a perfect segue. Because let's move into studs, everyone.
Yeah.
Feel good. Dak Prescott's gonna be okay.
He's okay. He's okay.
The studs, starting with who you just talked about, Teddy Bridgewater. He is quietly a quarterback one. Statistically, in fantasy, as you'll see, it only says number 13 QB because there's still a game going on. But he will move into QB1 after scoring 24 points, as I think he'll be like 11 or 12, I'm guessing. Really surprising in that Carolina offense, just proof that Robbie Anderson was such a huge addition for that team. But also on the other side of the coin is DK Metcalf, who is now wide receiver number 4 PPR, and I'm guessing I think he moves into like number 2 or 1 after this week after scoring 27 points. So both like huge, absolutely huge for Fowler's chances, and why we thought that he could be a competitive team before the Dak Prescott injury. Who is more surprising to you?
Ooh, that's a really tough question. I think just for a little bit of difference, I'm going to say Teddy Bridgewater. And the reason why I'm going to say Teddy Bridgewater is just because I actually thought this was kind of a quarterback that was kind of going to be on the decline of his career. Like, I know he went to Carolina, and I was like, oh, he might be okay. But I was like, at best, he's going to be what I thought was a low QB2. I truly did believe that. I didn't think he was going to be that good at all. And he's just played really well. He's played really consistent. He's come out throwing a ton, which is not anything really that was always something he was trying to figure out. But he's been constantly over 250 yards a game, which is something I did not see for him coming. And then he gets a couple of rushing yards. And the only reason why I'm not saying DK, I guess, in this place is because he was an up-and-coming prospect who was incredibly talented. He was a guy that I actually thought could easily make the potential to be a wide receiver 1 this year. Now, did I think this high? Of course not. I didn't think this high. But I thought he had potential to be a wide receiver 1. So that's why I'm going to go with Teddy, is because he's exceeded the ceiling that I put on top of him.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I still got to go with DK. They're both probably 2 of the biggest surprises of the entire year, honestly. But just the fact that DK has been so consistent. If you told me he was wide receiver 4, then I would have said, okay, so he had one game where he had 230 yards and 2 touchdowns. But that's not the case at all. He's had over 90 yards every game, and he's the only receiver to do that this year. That's insane. And he's only 22 years old. Like, this is shocking to me. He is the biggest riser in the entire league, in my opinion, this year. So,
yeah.
he's nuts.
While I do agree with you, Sam, I got to say I agree with Cody on this with Teddy Bridgewater. Like, I thought he was going to be, like, I think most people thought he was going to be low-end QB2. And it's hard to make the argument that I would ask, like, is he going to keep this up? But it's kind of hard to think that he wouldn't. There's no extenuating reasons or any odd injuries or any, like, weird coaching changes that would say that why Teddy Bridgewater is doing so well. He's just playing well. And it seems like he has a really high floor. Yeah. And so to me, he's the biggest surprise. Like, he basically went up a full position between being QB2 and QB1, where DK Metcalf is, high-end wide receiver 2 to, I guess, mid wide receiver 1, maybe even high end wide receiver. So Teddy Bridgewater is just crazy. What a huge pickup for Fowler's team. I mean, that's just crazy.
Yeah, he's been very good.
Yeah, there is the thing you can make the Matt Rule thing, being a rookie head coach for Carolina this year. Maybe he just truly figured something out with Teddy, coming from college too as a college coach.
He must have, and I know we all live in Minnesota, or a lot of us do in this league, and so it's pretty cool to see him actually step up and have success, because he seems like a really great guy to work with on a football team. So let's talk about duds. We've got Kenyon Drake, who, God, I hate saying that because, again, I'm pulling for Fowler. He is my love child, and I really wanted him to have a successful playoff run. And Kenyon Drake, who he traded for after getting Saquon Barkley, just not performing. A lot of talks that Chase Edmonds is going to start eating away from Kenyon Drake's snap percentage, targets, and the fact that Chase Edmonds actually is a better pass catcher out of the backfield as an RB on third downs. And then you've got DJ Chark, who, I guess I don't want to answer the question for you guys already. I'm not willing to say he's already a dud this season, but he's definitely underperforming relative to what I thought, especially with Gardner Minshew having an incredibly good season. So who's the more surprising, quote unquote, dud?
I think it's clearly Kenyon Drake. I don't even think it's. I don't mean to like be offensive to your question, but I think this is like a softball question. So offensive, but I think this is a softball question. To me, DJ Chark, the only bad weeks he's had have been because of injuries. Like he missed a game and then he didn't do well that game. I mean, the first 2 weeks he had 11 points and then 13 points, which is fine. It's not like terrible. And then like he had 29 points against Cincinnati when he was fully healthy. He only had 4 last week, but then again, he also left because of an injury. And so whereas like Kenyon Drake was being drafted as easily an RB1, and he's RB31 right now. Like he's fallen so much.
And declining.
Yeah, and declining. And his snap percentage is only been over like 70% one game, and that was the first game. I think it's clearly Kenyon Drake.
Yep, I agree. I mean, if you're talking redraft, Kenyon Drake was a debatable first-round pick. And DJ Chark was, I don't know, 4th or 5th probably. DJ Chark has barely fallen short of his expectations. I think most people thought he'd be like a solid wide receiver 2, which it's like, sure, he's a mid to high wide receiver 3. It sucks. He's definitely played. He should have done better this year, but man, has Drake been really bad. Yep, I'm worried about him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a really, in hindsight, it's looking like an awesome sell high for Kenyon Drake on the end of Trujillo, right? So
Yeah.
For Saquon?
yeah, right.
Not bad.
Exactly. Yeah, sell high and buy low in combination. I mean, that's the winning strategy for any fantasy trade. So I do agree with you guys. I do think that there are some mild concerns for DJ, only because I do think Visca is relevant. Keelan Cole is showing up. Gardner Minshew is awesome, and DJ Chark is still not that much more relatively awesome, even though he has been affected by injuries. But Kenyon Drake is the answer to this question. 100%, 1,000%. So that's Ben Fowler's team. I'm going to say it again. I'm really rooting for you, bud, because you've had some rough luck, and I really do appreciate that you've put a lot into your team and a lot of effort into making it competitive. So thank you for that, because we all love that. So let's move on to division number 2, starting with Laramie's team. Right away, off the bat, you see Robbie Anderson and Jared Goff. And this is a situation where Robbie Anderson as a stud, really, I kind of came out of nowhere because he's never been this kind of versatile receiver that can handle the wide receiver 1 volume. I think everyone thought he was just a stretch the field receiver that was throw deep to him. He would catch these fast and he'd run into the end zone. But this week he actually had more targets than he's had all season with 13 targets. So he's just continuing to get even more of a lion's share in that offense. And then you have Jared Goff, who had a couple, he seems like every other year in his career, he's been good versus bad, then good, then bad. But this is one of those years where he's good again, and now coming off of a 29-point week against an admittedly bad team in Washington, but he's going to move to somewhere around, QB 7 to QB 9. So Jared Goff is a QB 1. Who are you more surprised about?
To me, it's Robbie Anderson. Jared Goff has exceeded expectations, but I think everyone knew he had the potential. Robbie Anderson, through 5 weeks, as a little fun fact, he has over half as many yards as his best season ever. So, like, he is on pace to basically get 50% more yards than he's ever had in his entire career, which is 5 or 6 years. No one saw it coming. He's had 99 plus yards every week but one, and that week was even 55, so not that bad. I don't know. I'm shocked. At this point, he might even do it going forward. Who knows?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the only thing I want to add about Jared Goff and why it might not be too much of a surprise is I get that he's going to, currently it says he's QB number 9. I get that he's going to be moving up after a great week here. But I mean, 2 years ago, he finished as number 6. So we know he has the potential to do this. We know he's done this. He's never, in the last 4 years, he hasn't finished lower than QB 13. So he always has a relatively low floor.
High floor, yeah.
Or high floor, sorry. Yep. Thank you. And, we've seen that he can have a pretty high ceiling as well. I know he hasn't fully done it, but so to me, Jared Goff's not that much of a surprise, whereas Robbie Anderson, completely out of left field.
I agree. As 2 notes for that, I think it's really cool that Robbie Anderson did exceed expectations, and he is able to carry that volume. And I agree that's why he affectionately has stepped up. But Jared Goff, I do want to note, to me it is pretty surprising with the loss of Brandon Cooks that he was able to still have this good of a season, because I wasn't necessarily convinced that Jared Goff would be able to do this well without him, because to me they don't necessarily have a clear wide receiver one type of player, because I don't think Robert Woods really is, and I've always thought that Cooper Kupp was more of like a toolsy slot receiver. So I guess I'm more surprised than you guys are about Jared Goff, but still, Robbie Anderson's incredible.
Yeah, Jared Goff has really made a key thing of kind of using his tight ends this year, which I think that's something we haven't really seen from him in the past. Is like he was always fully wide receiver dependent, whereas like he included Higbee on that one game, and then even this last week he included Everett, kind of as the main focal points. So I think he's just learning how to spread the ball around even more so than he already was doing.
No, that's true. That's a good point. Let's talk about his duds, because he's got two of them. Michael Gallup going into the season, and really from a dynasty perspective, a lot of people had listed him as a wide receiver 2, and then CeeDee Lamb got drafted, and his value went down instantly, but no one expected to be this much. But on the other side of the coin, an older gentleman by the name of Rob Gronkowski came back into the league, and we were maybe expecting him with Tom Brady to have a season, maybe not too similar than what he used to have in New England. I think a lot of people thought he was going to be a low-end tight end 1. And so between Rob Gronkowski and the aforementioned Michael Gallup, who's more surprising to you as a dud?
I think for me, it has to be Rob Gronkowski. I thought after the kind of decline of O.J. Howard kind of last year, even though I think he's still a good good tight end, I just thought that there was going to be chemistry between those two, and I thought at the very least he'd be a low end tight end 1. And he's just not anywhere close. He doesn't look nearly as good at all. And I mean, for Michael Gallup, at least, even though he's gotten taken over CeeDee Lamb, at least I can say he still looks good. I mean, he made an insane catch this last week to put them into field goal range. I mean, he's still really talented. It's just that when your competition's Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, you're just going to stink from there. So I actually think Gallup has a high probability chance of going to a different team and succeeding there.
Yeah, I kind of have actually a split answer, because I completely agree with everything you said, that Rob Gronkowski, I think he's basically done, right? Like he's not looking good. Even with Tom Brady, he hasn't really produced at all, whereas Gallup still does look talented, but he's definitely been outshined on that offense. I think up through 5 weeks, Gallup has been the bigger disappointment to me, but going forward, Gronkowski's the bigger disappointment, because I do think Gallup is still a talented receiver and will add value going forward.
Gronkowski is the bigger surprise as a dud, but Michael Gallup definitely had the writing on the wall after CeeDee Lamb was drafted. I thought we kind of expected that he would go down in volume, just not to this much degree. But interesting to note that once Dalton came into the game, Gallup had 2 key catches for that team and actually propelled them to the victory. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's just something to watch. Would be interesting to see if Michael Gallup does get back to that wide receiver 2 on that team with Dalton. Who knows?
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
Yep,
So
totally agree.
So very interesting. And that's all Laramie's team. Any other thoughts about his team that you guys can think of?
I guess we didn't really talk about running backs. He has good running backs.
Yeah.
That's the only other thing I want to mention.
Yeah,
But other than that, that's it.
Yeah, solid running backs with Mixon, Montgomery, and Sanders, and now Chase Edmonds. Actually, that is interesting because Chase Edmonds is on his team, and so he actually is someone that would be a great trade target. Trade Chase Edmonds if you want to buy low on him right now, or buy mid.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So
I agree. And actually, one kind of final point on his team is he did just be the first one to knock off Trujillo from an undefeated season.
yeah,
So
Yeah.
good for him. Good win.
We have
I should
been-
say probably
probably right.
Allen's still playing, but
High percentage chance. We were all pretty low on Laramie's team going into this year, and have been in the past couple of weeks. But he's going to go to 2-3, and let's keep looking at Laramie's team in the future. All right. But I do want to talk about my team now because I'm self-centered and pretty egotistical. So it would only be fitting that I talk in my fancy podcast voice about my own team. So to me, I've identified that my studs this year that are surprising are both Ronald Jones and Devontae Parker. Ronald Jones, without Leonard Fournette, is an RB1 in my opinion for sure, and just incredibly efficient running back. But I'm not sure if that's sustainable. And Devontae Parker, I'm only surprised because he's just continuing what he did last year. So he's just continuing the breakout. And I wasn't necessarily sure that he would do that. So between those two, who's the most surprising to you?
The most surprising to me has to be Ronald Jones. Just for the fact that when I learned Leonard Fournette was going over there, I thought he had completely lost his job. I thought he was going to become fantasy irrelevant. I thought it was going to be 100% all of those factors. Whereas, like, Devontae Parker has always had the potential to be a very good wide receiver number one on a team to me. He's always had the skill, just never had the quarterback. But now he has Ryan Fitzpatrick on his team that's able to deliver that week in and week out just through sheer volume because of how much he throws. So to me, like, it's actually not terribly surprising to see Devontae Parker having a good season. I wouldn't have predicted it, but I'm not surprised by it. Whereas, like, Ronald Jones, I didn't even think he'd be playing.
Man, we've completely agreed on everything you've said, or most of everything you've said all night, honestly. Yeah, Ronald Jones has been super surprising. I think he's played super well throughout the year, and even after they drafted Keyshawn Vaughn, he's clearly outplayed both him and Leonard Fournette at this point. So he's been really good.
I'm just going to say for the purpose of this segment, I couldn't think of any other surprise studs, which is just a testament to my team. That's just so sad. That's why I had to say Devontae Parker, to be honest. Ronald Jones is really only the only surprising stud, and I think it's the reason my team is in that tier 2 instead of being up there with Trujillo and you, Sam, because I don't have any other surprising studs. It's just a bummer.
Jameson Crowder, actually.
Sure.
He's only played 3 weeks, but his lowest is 19.5. So
okay.
I also would
that's
say
actually really, really good. But
Big
That's
Ben.
true.
He's consistently got 20 points every game he plays,
That's true.
which is actually kind of surprising coming back from a big injury like that.
yeah, and another. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm actually glad you guys brought up both of those players because to me they're not surprising, but from the outside looking in, it is interesting for sure. But on the dud side, I do have a couple players. Unfortunately, Juju Smith-Schuster has really taken a step down in that offense. And as well as Jordan Howard has taken an even bigger step, and he's a guy that was supposed to be an RB2 this year. And people were like, "Oh yeah, there's no competition in that backfield. Matt Breida sucks. Jordan Howard's gonna look like he did back when he was on the Bears in his first couple of years." So, who are you more surprised as a dud with, Jordan Howard or Juju?
I think I have to, just for the sake that he was supposed to be the starter to start off the season. I mean, eventually it would be Jordan Howard, just because he was supposed to be the starter. And then he never really ever was the starter, and then he hasn't been anything. So, like, if people drafted him in a redraft league, which they generally did, they were like, "Oh, I maybe have a okay RB2, but he just hasn't been anything close to that." Whereas, like, Juju, again, kind of like the Ben Roethlisberger thing, minus last week, or this week, I should say, he hasn't been that bad. I mean, 24 points, 11 points, 16 points. I get it's not where you want Juju to be at, but coming off of a down year, you could have had the expectation that he just continued what he was doing last year. I didn't have that expectation, but you could have had that.
Yep, I agree. I think I had Juju at roughly like a high wide receiver 2, and now he's like a mid wide receiver 3 this year, which really sucks, but he's still providing value for your team compared to Jordan Howard, who is... Will you ever start him again? I mean, realistically.
No, it's to the point. He's actually my first drop on my team. I think he will be a player that I will drop if I have to drop someone. And yeah, he's 25. That's the most shocking thing to me.
Yeah, it's weird.
Have you? By the way, if you just look at his stats, strictly his stats, look at his yards per carry.
Oh, I know.
0.9, 0.8, 0.3, and 1.
It's not good. It's not good at all.
Oh my god, that's terrible.
That's unbelievable.
I get it's not that high a volume, but it seems like it would be enough.
No, you guys are single-handedly propelling me to want to just drop this man. I don't want anything to do with him anymore. All right, so as you guys need to stop being crud question. This is actually going to go for Brandon Cooks and Marquise Brown, which is kind of funny because the theme of this question actually kind of got answered in this week. They both had big weeks, their biggest weeks for both of them in the season. Marquise Brown had 19.8 points after getting 10 targets, which really was not his MO. He was more of the, again, not to keep saying the same phrases I say before, but he was drafted as a stretch the field player or maybe like a slot receiver that can go in and get some slant routes and then get some yak. generation. But then you have Brandon Cooks, very, to me, similar receiver to Marquise Brown, who before Bill O'Brien got fired, that was the whole news, was what would happen with Brandon Cooks before and after Bill O'Brien. And already, immediately, we're seeing that Bill O'Brien leaving was fantastic for Brandon Cooks because he had 12 targets in that offense. So this isn't really a who do you believe in surprise more. This question is who finishes higher in value between Brandon Cooks and Marquise Brown
In
rest of season.
rest of season value? Oh boy, I'm just always gonna take the number one wide receiver on a team. I trust that more. I trust his targets a little bit more. Like the fact that Brandon Cooks has had multiple games where, like, he's had 5 targets first game, 8 targets second game, 5, 3, and then now 12. And it's only 1 week without Bill O'Brien, so maybe I need more. Whereas, like, Marquise Brown on the other end has never been under 6 in targets. He's had over 6, and he's only been raising from 6 to 8 to 10 then after that. So I'm going to trust my gut. I'm going to say Marquise Brown in this case, but I understand the Brandon Cooks argument.
Yeah, I'm definitely going Brown. I mean, if Brandon Cooks has 3 more weeks of 12 targets, then sure. But like Marquise Brown is on a better offense. I think he's a more talented receiver, and he's clearly number 1 compared to Cooks isn't. So going with him.
I kind of want to take a dollar bet on this because because it's my concerns with Marquise Brown have been that I don't think he can really handle a target share this high, and I think the fact that his 10 targets is his highest, I would be willing to bet that's probably his highest in his career so far, even though it's only 2 years. I actually do think this is a turning point for Brandon Cooks.
I hope.
Yeah, and I know you as we're all co-owners of Brandon Cooks. I'm gonna go ahead and say Brandon Cooks. I guess I don't know how to define this, but I guess they're pretty similar right now. So Brandon Cooks finishes higher than Marquise Brown. Is that
okay? You want
reasonable?
Both of us?
Yeah, I'll take the double bet on that one. I just believe in that quarterback as a quarterback more. Don't get me wrong, I do love Lamar Jackson, but
Whoa! Can we mark this down?
What just happened? Did Tom just dollar bet himself?
this is tough. I think Deshaun Watson is a better quarterback, and as much as I don't want to believe in Romeo Crennel, better quarterback thrower. Right?
Thrower.
And I do think Brandon Cooks is a better receiver than Brown too. So coupled both of those.
Okay.
Gosh. I might eat my words later on, but I
think it's a fair bet.
Yeah.
I was really big into Cooks coming into the year because I thought he would be the wide receiver 1 on that team. I'm just scared from what Fuller has shown so far.
Yeah, but it can't possibly coincidence that the first week without Bill O'Brien, he just goes off.
I don't know.
Right?
I will never be more happy to lose a bet in my entire life.
Yeah.
Also, to kind of stat verify you really quick, Marquise Brown has only had 1 game with higher target numbers. That's the 2nd week of his career when he had 13 targets. So just a fun little stat thing. But you're basically right for all intents and purposes.
Right. So thank you, Tony Reale. I actually do appreciate that.
Yeah. You're welcome.
All right. Let's talk about Eric Barber. I will note that I will be moving to 2 and 3, and I guess that'll put me somewhere in the division. Eric Barber.
It sure will. It sure will.
That's true.
Unless the garbage points come in, actually.
Yeah. I'm still going to be 3rd in points. Actually, I'm moving ahead and kind of separating and divide as being 3rd in points just because I have a pretty high floor as points. So that's good. But Eric Barber, he's moving to something and something. I still don't know. I don't know how he's doing this week, but he's currently 2 and 2 is what I have through 4 weeks. Someone can.
He'll be going to 2 and 3.
Barber will be 2 and 3.
Yeah.
You lost to Mike.
Okay.
So you'll be taking the lead over him.
So I'll be in 2nd in the division.
Yep.
So Barber will be 3rd. But let's start talking about some receivers here. 2 of them, CeeDee Lamb and Tyler Boyd. We've kind of talked about both these guys just intrinsically from talking about AJ Green and talking about Michael Gallup. But to you, between Tyler Boyd and CeeDee Lamb, who are you more surprised about? Sam.
I don't. Do I have anyone to explain it? It's CeeDee Lamb for sure.
Yeah, I think it has to be CeeDee Lamb. Just at this point, just going in as number 3. I'm not going to put up a fuss, but the Tyler Boyd one is interesting. I don't want to downplay Tyler Boyd.
Tyler Boyd is wide receiver 18 in PPR right now.
That seems like it's pretty much right in line to me.
Really?
Maybe slightly higher than I would have had him. Did you have him below a wide receiver 2 coming into the year?
Probably not. But but I thought he had the potential to be lower because I thought AJ Green would be higher, which I thought
T. Higgins.
Yeah, because I always thought Tyler Boyd. I always thought
yeah.
Tyler Boyd was the type of wide receiver that needed AJ Green to be out in order to perform well. But obviously, that's not true.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, he's having a good season. I'm pleasantly surprised. But CeeDee Lamb, I didn't expect to actually be a startable asset.
Yep.
And it turns out he's literally a wide receiver 1.
No, I agree.
During his rookie
I do
season.
agree with you with what you're saying for sure.
So I'm going to come at a different angle. I agree, but I think the biggest reason I agree is not because of how CeeDee Lamb looks, because we knew he was talented, and it's not because of the fact that he's only had one game with a touchdown, and he had 2 touchdowns in that game of Cleveland. It's actually a different angle. I'm surprised with his target share. Like, that's ridiculous for a rookie to get 6, 9, 7, 7, and 11. So to me, that's, I think, from like a statistical analysis perspective, that's one of the targets is like most easy to predict week to week. So that's super positive moving forward this year. And he's a 21-year-old receiver. So with whoever his quarterback is, Dalton or Dak Prescott in the future, he's got a bright future as receiver.
Not to mention his yards per catch has been over 10 every single game. That is nuts.
Yes. Yeah. That is. I'm glad you brought that up. That's crazy.
Yeah, he hasn't had one bad game the
No.
entire season, which is absolutely insane for a rookie.
Yep.
So moving on to duds. We got Deebo Samuel and Marvin Jones. Deebo Samuel quite affected by injuries so far this year, but in the games that he has played and has been pseudo healthy, especially the most recent game, he struggled. He had 8 targets, but he only hauled in 2 balls and only had 19 yards in the one game that he played 90% snap share. And Marvin Jones has really stepped down in that offense. With Kenny Golladay out, they expected early on in the season that the Lions would be throwing more to Marvin Jones. So, Sam, who are you more disappointed in and more surprised?
I'm more disappointed in Boyd. Or sorry, not Boyd, obviously. Sorry, it was Debo and
Marvin Jones.
Jones I'm more disappointed in. Debo has only played a game and a half, and given it hasn't been good, but like I'll give him a little bit of a break on that, especially because the game he did play, they switched quarterbacks halfway through, which is unfortunate. Jones, I actually thought was going to have a really good season. I was pretty high on him, and his highest week is 12.3. That's not good at all.
No, I completely agree. And he's only going down. Like, his target share has only decreased since Galladay's been back. I mean, to the point, what was he at, like 2 or 3 last week as far as targets? Like, it's looking worse and worse for him, where I agree with you. Debo, you can kind of give, a little bit of a break to. He's just coming back from an injury.
Yep.
So do either of these receivers have a better opportunity to bounce back? I mean, and who is it?
To me, Debo, for sure. I think he will bounce back. I think he could, rest of season, probably be like a low to mid wide receiver 2, I'd say.
Yeah, I think I would have to agree with that. I don't know. I feel like Detroit's offense is centered around its running backs now, and then you kind of add in Galladay and Hawk, and then you go from there. I mean, Brandon Ayuk's had a good season too, which is he's kind of taken over a bigger role, so that might take out a Deebo Samuel's potential, but at the same time, he's a rookie, so you never know.
Okay. So I want to move on to the wild card question. These are 2 running backs, Miles Sanders, and Kareem Hunt, who are really seeing a lot more value. Wait a minute. Emmanuel Sanders.
Yeah.
I want to make a clarification. Emmanuel Sanders, and they're not running backs. 1 receiver, 1 running back, Kareem Hunt. And the wild card question here for this is, who retains more relative value once Thomas and Chubb come back? Is it Emmanuel Sanders, who with Michael Thomas out had 14 targets last night against Los Angeles? Or is it Kareem Hunt, who retains more value with Chubb back, who had 20 carries and 4 targets in the receiving game?
I think it's Hunt. I think Hunt has played well when Chubb's been playing, which is a big qualification to me, whereas Sanders I don't think shows as much because he's clearly behind Kamara and Michael Thomas. So I think Hunt actually still is like a low running back 2, high running back 3, even with Chubb in the lineup.
Yeah, I could not agree more with you. I think it's clearly Hunt. We just don't know what Sanders is going to do.
It's more of an interesting question than what you guys are asking it as, because I do think there is a possible. I mean, Emmanuel Sanders is an incredibly good receiver. Granted, he is way late in the twilight of his career, but the fact that he was able to catch 12 of 14 balls And to me, but I guess he does have competition with Traquan Smith, as I'm talking that out right too, who has also kind of had a huge breakout with Michael Thomas out. So, God damn it, I have to agree with you guys.
Yeah, we very well could
Yeah.
be wrong because like Sanders didn't look good last year, but it was also his first year in the offense, which is a pretty big difference. And he's talked about that in interviews, is that he didn't pick up the playbook as quickly as he would have liked. So maybe he understands it better now, and maybe he is the clear number 2 behind Michael Thomas and can actually get receptions. I just feel like Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara are such big assets. You need to get them the ball, and that just doesn't leave enough for Sanders.
I'm just going off historically what I've seen. Historically, I've seen Kareem Hunt still be successful even with Nick Chubb being there. Historically, I haven't seen a Saints number 2 wide receiver be successful or fantasy relevant.
Fair enough. I think that's a good way to end it on that. So that's Eric Barber's team. It's the 3rd in the division now as far as record, but he will be actually potentially even moving down farther just based off his points for, because he only has 583 in that division. But that's going to change after this week. God damn it! So let's talk about Sam's team. I'm going to stop talking anything but points or record because I just want to talk about teams. So Sam's team. I mean, what is there to say? I hate jacking him off every week, but he does have 2 players that are affected by injury, which are Mike Davis or Alexander Madison. And I think the question to ask here is, who's going to be the better handcuff moving forward between Mike Davis and Alexander Madison?
Cody, you take this one. It's my team.
Okay. I think it's interesting. I think just for the sake of volume, I'm personally going to say while they're injured, I mean, if you just don't take in the fact that Christian McCaffrey will probably be back here soon, I'm going to say Mike Davis. I think Mike Davis has shown a little bit higher ability to put up the stats, and the fact that I feel like he doesn't have any competition to be that number 1 guy right now. Madison, while he starts, I get that he got 20 carries, and they'll probably keep doing that. Maybe they'll run him into the ground. It very well could happen. But Mike Boone is not a bad running back by any means at all, and could definitely cut into Madison, even if Madison struggles a little bit. Like Madison, watching him, he's kind of the power back, whereas Boone's kind of the more shifty running back. So it's like, if you run into like a team that can stop power running backs, Boone might get a little bit more of the play, whereas like Mike Davis has seemed kind of like defense irrelevant. Like he gets passes, he catches passes, and he gets the carries there. So that's where I'm going to stand on that.
Yep, totally agree. I think if you talked to me 3 weeks ago, I would have said Madison because I think he's a better running back. But the way they've used Mike Davis, it's impossible to replicate 9 catches a game. You just can't reproduce that with Madison. So yeah, I think Davis is really good.
The system in Carolina's upside outmatches the talent of Alexander Madison.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yep.
And that's just huge. It's just funny that you have 2 top 5 running backs that have both been injured, but it doesn't matter because you have the handcuff.
Yeah, that's why you get
Smart. That's why you always get them. That's why you always get them.
Yeah, kudos to you for sure. Maybe we'll make a documentary in the future about how to handle, how the best team was handled. Go through the trades that you made, the pickups you made.
Yeah.
Police, you've been handcuffed.
Yeah.
All right. You do have some duds, though, my friend. Julio Jones.
Yeah, your team sucks.
Julio Jones and Michael Thomas, who one of them is injured, so it's kind of unfair to label him as a dud, but they are both injured. So which one of these injuries worries you most between Julio Jones or Michael Thomas?
I'm a lot more concerned about Julio. He's older by 4 or 5 years, something quite a bit. Probably on a worse offense, and I think that hamstring injury really could just linger. MT, I am still a little worried about, but I'm glad they held him out for disciplinary reasons this week, which I'm pretty sure is just a cover because he's still injured. But Julio actually I'm concerned about. I don't even know if I hope he's a mid wide receiver 2 going forward. That's my goal, which I would not have said beginning of the season.
I probably would have to agree with you just because of age. I think that's kind of the biggest thing. From everything I can see, it looks like because Michael Thomas had an ankle injury, and then Julio's still hamstring, and hamstring worries me a lot more.
Yep.
But
I think this question is evidence that we need Adam Wentz, our resident doctor on the team, to be on the podcast, because I have no idea how to analyze the injuries, but I have to agree. Julio Jones has a lot more competition for that wide receiver 1 slot, too, with Calvin Ridley, whereas there isn't anyone that's even close to being viable. Like, if Michael Thomas had any issues with injuries moving forward, the Saints would have to draft someone to address that position. So, it goes to show, I agree with you, 1,000%. All right, so the wild card question here is targeting players by the name of everyone. We're targeting everyone on your team. I'm just going to ask a pretty stupid question, but needs to be asked is, what would have to happen to your team for you not to get a bye this year?
It's super unlikely, obviously, but I actually think this upcoming week, which we'll get to the predictions going forward, this is the most important week of my season, other than week 1 where I played you. I play O'Brien, who is he 3-2? I think he's 4-1 actually. After this week, he'll be 4-1 after this week, which is 1 game behind me, and we play each other. And I have a shit ton of bye weeks. I can only start 1 quarterback, and my backup, like my flex play for that, is going to be really bad. So I think my biggest route to not getting a bye is losing to him and him winning out.
So does that happen? Is that gonna happen, Cody?
No, it's not going to happen. I mean, I guess if I had to draw some little fantasies, storytell thing of explanation of why that would happen to Sam, maybe Patrick Mahomes gets injured, Russell Wilson regresses, your handcuff, Christian McCaffrey and Delvin Cook stay injured longer, so your handcuffs don't perform well. Like, do you know how many stipulations I had to put on this story in order for you to be bad? It's unbelievable.
So why are we even talking about it? Let's move on.
We're not.
All right. So let's go from the first team to the worst team. Oh, and that's Cody's team name.
First to worst. It's as Alyssa said, this is the life you chose.
Yeah. I like it.
That's funny. Henry.
Humor.
Activating humor sequence.
Humor response. Henry Ruggs had 2 catches for 118 yards. And I don't even, we were going to talk about who's more surprising, him or Justin Jackson. And Justin Jackson only is a product of his injury environment. So I just want to talk about Henry Ruggs and go kind of more reductive to what you were talking about last week, where we would just highlight players. Is Henry Ruggs, is this just who he is? Is he Deshaun Jackson?
I guess in that offense, he's going to turn into that. Yeah. I mean, that offense loves to throw the ball downfield. That is just what they do, which if he's going to be a part of that offense with John Gruden, that just is what he's going to be. But he has the talent level to do it. I mean, we'll have to see. We've yet to see him get on the field for more than 65% of the snaps. So maybe he develops into more of a pass catching. I don't think he will. I think he's just a downfield threat. I think that's what everybody always knew he was.
Yeah, Deshaun Jackson's an awesome comparison. I think it's the best possible comparison you can make. I actually think that offense is really versatile. I think they have Henry Ruggs that goes deep all the time. You have Waller, who gets a ton of targets up the middle, basically the Kelsey factor. And you have Josh Jacobs, who's a great power game. Like, that offense could actually be good.
And they have Hunter Renfrow, who was a lot of people's sleeper pick last year. Or I shouldn't say sleeper pick, but really exceeded expectations on that team. So
Nelson Aguilar caught a ball.
Yeah,
that's impressive. Anytime he makes a catch, that's impressive to me.
I had him on my team for a little bit.
It always makes me think of that guy that caught the baby from the falling the building and the burning building, and he's just like, I caught the baby, unlike Aguilar.
The best meme.
Yeah, oh, it's so good. So all right, that's my only stud for Cody's team.
I was looking at duds here. I'm so ready.
Yeah, there's some duds too. They're hard to scrape. One of them is a true dud, and we've talked about him every week. And Christian Kirk, who has this week still only 11, 12 points if you want to round up. But you made a joke last week, Sam, about talking about Lynn Bowden. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have a laugh. Your team is so hard to talk about.
Very cool. I'm gonna write the questions for my team going forward. This is fucking ridiculous. You mentioned Lynn Bowden. Why are we talking about Lynn Bowden?
Oh, he's not your starter anymore?
No, he hasn't started for me in such a long time, almost a week.
Yeah. Oh my god. All right. Anyway, I'll take this one. Christian Kirk has been really disappointing. He did have a decent week here, so I'm sure you're really happy to see that. 7 targets, 5 receptions, 78 yards. Hopefully he picks it up a little bit. Maybe that Arizona offense can balance it out a little bit rather than just going to Hopkins. But overall, I mean, are you worried about him going forward? 2 10-point weeks in a row. Do you think he's going to be a wide receiver 2, lower than that, better than that?
I mean, until he proves he gets targets, he's lower than that.
Okay.
So that's the way I feel about him. I mean, like, he's still a good player. It's just, is he going to get the targets? I mean, the way DeAndre Hopkins, like, demands targets. I mean, he doesn't actually demand them, but he basically gets them. We'll see. I still think he has potential for a low wide receiver 2.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, I guess the reason I would want to point out Lynn Bowden is because I am very surprised that on this team that already got rid of essentially Jordan Howard, I mean, kicked him to the curb. Lynn Sam, this is why you took over. You made me laugh now, though. Lynn Bowden still hasn't done
He has just over a point and a half on the season.
I know.
Very disappointing.
And I have to say, I am actually going to go ahead and say that I could see the situation that Christian Kirk goes down with DeAndre Hopkins joining that team is actually more likely than Lynn Bowden doing flat out nothing. Like I'm going to say the answer to this question.
That's actually fair. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Because look at what we're seeing with, like, we just talked about CEH, who's a new running back, and this Lynn Bowden, they were so, in the offseason, they were like, oh, we drafted him because he's toolsy, and we really want to get him. I remember the quote, like, we want to get him involved in this offense right away. And then they had RB turmoil, running back turmoil, and have Miles effing Gaskin at running back, and Lynn Bowden still isn't involved. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, he was an early 3rd-round pick this year. I mean, like, so it wasn't like he's, like, just like a complete... I mean, he is a complete nobody, but he at least was a dart throw. He at least was something in the conversation of being a dart throw.
That's
like, I mean, I picked him up as just somebody released him, so I just picked him up because I was like, well, this seems like a running back with opportunity, and he has the wide receiver designation also. So, because that was like his big thing was he was a playmaker. He's just a playmaker, so you never know where guys like that could be successful.
and he doesn't make any plays right now. So he's, to me, he's actually the more surprising dud, to be completely frank, because I don't know if he will turn out. If he doesn't turn out this year, and they have like 6 running backs by committee without Jordan Howard, if he ever show up on that team.
And I put him back to waiver hell.
Yeah, maybe you will. Stidham, Jarrett Stidham, Jordan Love, and Jacob Eason. They're both on your team. Who is most likely to be on your team in 10 years, if we play 10 years? Or who's going to turn out the most? Who do you like the most as a dynasty quarterback?
It's got to be Jordan Love, right? I mean, even with Aaron Rodgers' success, it's just the fact that the team committed so much to him in order to get him that there's no way they don't use him ever. Whereas, like, Jared Stidham, they might commit to him, but he really wasn't that high. Same thing with Jacob Eason. He wasn't really that high of a draft pick. Where Jordan Love just had the designation. It has to be him.
Yeah, I agree. Even if he's not playing on the Packers, he'll play somewhere, I think.
I mean, he's a first-round pick. Like,
was he first?
Or he was in the first round. He was in the late first round.
About that. Jesus,
that's what I'm saying.
Insane.
Like, for that draft pick, you have to imagine they're going to start him eventually. I could see they probably will just do the Aaron Rodgers thing. Hold on to him for 4 years and then start him as soon as he retires.
I think it's a close second, though, for Jarrett Stidham. Because in the same argument that he'll go somewhere eventually, I could see him having kind of like a Kirk Cousins type career where he's a good backup on a team for a long time, and then he'll get his chance to start and be like really good for a while, and then he'll go somewhere else. Like, I could see that being his career trajectory.
I hope so. That word sounds great to me.
Yeah, he could, for sure.
So I actually think Jarrett Stidham has a much higher floor than Jordan Love, because I'm not necessarily convinced of Jordan Love's ability to just be a quarterback, period.
Sure.
So,
I have no knowledge of his ability because we haven't seen him play yet.
well,
so, yeah,
true.
We'll see.
True. It will be interesting to monitor, which is why we asked it.
Yep.
But let's stop talking about this trash team that starts Lynn Bowden every other week.
Hey, fuck you.
Let's talk about Marcus Skoniewski's team. In this situation, it's interesting because he has a couple studs that, in my opinion, have emerged. one of them out of nowhere, one of them not out of nowhere, but a little surprising that he has been as good as he has been. And that's Justin Herbert versus Chris Carson. Justin Herbert is a stud. He is an NFL quarterback. I've said this every week. I want to make love to him. And just last night, I watched a lot of that game, and he just... That play, I'm going to describe it for you guys. He ran, he rolled out, he evaded a sack first, number one. Like, he read the sack that was coming, the all-8 blitz, completely ran around them. Then he's rolling out towards the sideline and just guns it to Keenan Allen, which, yes, Keenan Allen made a nice play, but, like, a lot of receivers could make that play. It was just the perfectly thrown ball. I love Justin Herbert. I don't know if he's a buy low or a buy mid or whatever, but I just would love to own him. And then you have Chris Carson, who... I think a lot of people were never mind. I don't know why he's in this stud. I mean, we're not that surprised with him being an RB number 5. So can you guys convince me that Chris Carson is a surprising stud, I guess?
I actually do think he's a surprising stud. Personally, I guess if we're comparing so far through 5 weeks, I think Chris Carson is more surprising than Herbert. I think Herbert going forward will be a lot better, but I don't know if anyone even expected him to be top 12, much less RB5. Like, he's an elite running back so far this year, which I'm really surprised about.
So why wouldn't he be considered an RB1 or top 12? I mean, what was the logic?
A lot of weapons on that offense. He hasn't necessarily been in that category before, and just typically where he's been ranked, I've never seen him top 10.
That's fair. Cody, do you agree?
No, I mean, I agree with the points you're making. I do think the bigger surprise is Justin Herbert right now. I think it's the fact that, I didn't even know if he'd be starting yet. I think that's the biggest surprise right there. And then not only is he starting well, but to date, he is the best rookie quarterback out of that draft. He's playing better than Burrow. Like, from everything I can see. And don't get me wrong, I like Burrow. I like Burrow a lot, but he's playing better than him. And, like, for me, Chris Carson being there, number 5 is a surprise, for sure. But I always thought it'd be a high RB2, just because he tends to kind of be alone and get the carries there. You know, Penny was injured going into the season. They maybe signed Carlos Hyde. So it was like he was going to be the guy. So to me, it's like, don't get me wrong, number 5 is definitely a surprise, but Herbert had to overcome a lot more obstacles to get where he's at right now than I think Carson did.
They're both surprising, but yeah, the fact it's the reason it's Justin Herbert is because it's both ROS value and the rest of dynasty value. Like,
dynasty for sure. I would take Herbert based on how he's played so far.
Just crazy. I mean, that you can already make. I mean, it's hard to say that he isn't just an NFL quarterback today after 5 weeks. So that's why I would pick Herbert. But I do see your point. It is interesting to see that Carson is having his best season fantasy wise, even though he's already been considered a stud for a lot of years. He's just even more elevated this year. Will be interesting to see if he keeps it up. I don't know if he will. But so Carson Wentz and Dwayne Haskins are QB 2 and 3 on this team. And I know for a fact that Marcus, as a competitor, really needed one of those guys to fully step up and be his super flex position. And actually this week, Marcus went very bold and started Antonio Gibson over both Carson Wentz and Dwayne Haskins, which I guess I shouldn't be surprised by Dwayne Haskins because he's been fully benched in favor of Kyle Allen. But who are you more surprised that in being a dud, in duditude? Is it Carson Wentz or Dwayne Haskins?
To me, it's Carson Wentz. I think Dwayne Haskins has shown he hasn't been that good, so it's not surprising he didn't take the next step. But Carson Wentz has been good, but he has looked not very good this year.
Yeah, I think it has to be Carson Wentz. For me, I don't say that with a lot of optimism, though, just because he is still the number 16 quarterback. While he looks bad, he looks awful. Fantasy-wise, he hasn't been awful as far as just fantasy relevancy. He's been okay. I mean, QB 16 isn't great. I would want him to be a QB number 1 if he could, but he's theoretically only 4 spots away from that right now. Whereas, like, Haskins, to me, I thought he'd for sure be he'd be a top 20 quarterback maybe this year, especially I thought he'd take some leaps and bounds. He has good wide receivers in Terry McLaurin, and, well, he has a good wide receiver in Terry McLaurin. But, I mean, there was even like Steven Sims or maybe a different guy, Isaiah Ford, or Isaiah something that could step up. I think it's Isaiah Ford. But either way, I guess in conclusion, I'm actually going to put it as a split. Surprising.
So while I agree with both of you, between Carson Wentz and Dwayne Haskins, who would you rather own in Dynasty? Who has the better chance to bounce back?
Carson Wentz.
Well, Carson Wentz, but I think the gap in value to start the season was so vast that it's not necessarily a fair comparison, just because like there was probably 1 to 2 full firsts in between value for them. But yeah, obviously Carson Wentz is a lot better than Dwayne Haskins.
So then, does Dwayne Haskins bounce back? I mean,
I don't know, maybe not, honestly.
yeah, that's tough.
That's
tough.
Yeah, it depends on where he goes.
Yeah, it's. I guess the reason I asked those two questions is because my biggest surprise is that he got pulled so quickly, because they dedicated so much in the offseason, and after 4 weeks he's already pulled in favor of Kyle Allen. Like, it almost feels like it's a coaching decision. Like, obviously all decisions like this are, but it really just feels like Ron Rivera just has like this innate ability to believe in Kyle Allen that no other team would otherwise. Like, I don't think if Kyle Allen was on any other team, he gets pulled this quickly.
I think it's Alex Smith more than Kyle Allen.
Well, Kyle Allen got injured, which is why Smith came in.
Yeah, maybe. I think it's the fact that Smith was healthy that I think... you're right. Overall, I think that's right, but I think Kyle Allen might have even still just been a bridge to Alex Smith.
Sure.
But you could be right, for sure.
All in all, I think Marcus has one of the most interesting and turbulent quarterback situations in the whole league, other than Fowler with Dak Prescott getting injured. Now, I would say the fact that he owns Haskins, Allen, Wentz, and Justin Herbert, and has Jalen Hurts waiting in the wings as a handcuff for Carson Wentz is just really interesting. So I look forward to looking in that more in the future. And that's moving on from Marcus's team to Matt's team, who, as a stud, we've got, to be honest with you, Matt has a really tough team to look at because he's got a lot of players that we were all kind of surprised going in. We were just talking about last week how he has a ton of running backs that have just come out of nowhere. But 2 of those players are Stephon Diggs and James Robinson. Stephon Diggs just switching teams, but being huge for Josh Allen's development and being huge for Stephon Diggs to prove that he can go somewhere else and still be a wide receiver number one. And it's the opposite story for James Robinson, who did nothing. He was an undrafted running back. Who are you more surprised in?
James Robinson. I mean, if you're talking about going into the season where it was a question mark on who was even going to be the starting Jags running back, it's James Robinson. I mean, to even be a top... I might have even been more surprised with this if James Robinson was even, say, RB18 right now, because I just didn't know who was going to be the guy in Jacksonville, versus Diggs has shown in the past that he, even with Adam Thielen on the other side, he still can be a wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I agree. It's James Robinson. The Jaguars have really shown their ability to believe in him, which is interesting. He's definitely more of a surprise. I'm also surprised on Diggs, just the fact of how well he's played switching to that team. But yeah, Robinson literally just came out of nowhere to be a very good asset.
Kirk Cousins is surprisingly bad. He is definitely a dud on Matt's team. And whenever we talk about Matt's team, we talk about how he's got kind of 2 like subpar QB2s in Kirk Cousins and Phillip Rivers. But on the other side of the coin, he's got, wait a minute, this can't be right. Someone filled in Jonathan Taylor. Is that a surprising dud?
Yeah. Okay. So I did fill these in. This is my doing because Jonathan Taylor is my boy. Maybe it's not a complete dud. I just think if you told me, or if you told anyone that Marlon Mack was going to get injured, Jonathan Taylor's going to be the bell cow, this is not what you expect from him. Okay. So I think in that regard, it's a dud, not from literally the beginning of the season where he was supposed to be a backup. Then it wasn't a dud.
So you're saying that it's surprising that Naheem Hines has taken as much of a chunk out of that offense running-wise.
And receiving-wise, and the fact that Jonathan Taylor hasn't been as good as people thought he would be.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense to me. So are you more concerned about Cousins or more concerned about Jonathan Taylor?
I'm way more concerned about Cousins for sure. I think Jonathan Taylor is still a good asset, but like I think most people thought he'd be like a mid RB1, and he's like a mid RB2 right now. But yeah, Cousins is not playing that well, but garbage time has saved him a few times, luckily.
Yeah, Cody, does Sam have any merit to what he's saying about Jonathan Taylor or no?
About him being a dud? I mean, sure. It all depends on what your expectation was at the beginning. I mean, I gotta be honest. I thought he would have been more of a bell cow. So, in that respect, he's a dud. But I mean, at the end of the day, he's still almost an RB1. So, I mean, low RB1 at that, but almost an RB1. So, and that's for a rookie running back that. Whenever you get a rookie running back, I still think you always just have a question mark. I always think with rookies just in general, I mean, you always kind of put them at that mark, right? You always say they're a low RB1, they're a low wide receiver 1, so on and so forth, because you have to always put into account of like the question marks of what if they don't turn out. So he's actually still kind of probably where he started, maybe a little bit below that. But obviously Kirk Cousins is way below where he was.
Yeah, I will say we did just talk about a couple weeks ago about Jonathan Taylor versus CEH, and maybe we're changing the chides then. Maybe we're saying CEH is more valuable for this year just because he's for sure getting the volume and is the RB1, whereas Taylor, yeah, I mean, you look at snap percentage, you look at he's not being involved in the receiving game relative to Hines. I mean, I guess that is kind of concerning.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's concerning at least. Like looking at his snap percentage, he's on the field for basically less than half the game. Most of the games with the starting running back out. Let's point that out. It's like,
yeah,
even the runs he's had, he hasn't been that good as expected. I don't know. When he played, he was expected to be an RB1, and he has not played like an RB1.
Sure.
Which is funny because he has played like an RB1. He just isn't getting points like an RB1. Like, I actually think he's by far the best running back on that offense. I just think it's bad coaching.
Sure.
That's my take.
And that's fine too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think, yeah, what you expected after Marlon Mack got hurt, he has not produced to.
I think the biggest thing for Jonathan Taylor to see going forward, what will expect him, or what will make him interesting, is how good of a pass catcher is he? Because he actually wasn't a good pass catcher, if I remember correctly. Like, wasn't significantly that used in there for the Wisconsin offense. He was always just the running back, and then he didn't do much pass catching. And then going into the draft, he was like, "Hey, hold on here. I'm fine as a pass catcher. I can catch the ball." And which he showed week 1, so everyone was like, after week 1, was like, "Oh, okay, he is a good pass catcher. He's gonna be fine doing this." And then now he's just like disappeared from the pass catching game. To me, that's the biggest difference of will he be a high RB1? Will he not? Does he actually figure out pass catching?
I agree, and I think that's could be all play calling.
Yep.
Because like it's not like he's dropping balls, right?
No, I
It's
100%
It's
agree.
all about the targets. So
Yep.
yeah, we'll see. But I would be more worried than I would be 3 weeks ago.
Sure.
About him, so
Oh, very fair.
So Justin Jefferson, God, I feel like I always take victory laps. I'm not trying to. I'm really not. But it's just funny that just after last week, I was talking about how I was concerned about his target share and why I think we are a little bit too bullish on Justin Jefferson of late. He goes and has 5 targets only and 23 yards. And so I guess the reason we're talking about Justin Jefferson this week is to really point out that he did have another low, not another low week, but just a low week where all these other rookie receivers are having good weeks. So where does Justin Jefferson kind of, for the rest of the season, where does he end?
I still have him as a low wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3. That hasn't changed for me this week. I think he'll have his ups and downs, and that's fine. This week does not really concern me at all, personally.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. I think I would even make the argument low wide receiver 2, mid wide receiver 2. I think he's only going to get better as the season progresses. I think this isn't indicative of the way it's going to be for him going forward. It's just the way it is. I think you're going to have low games, but then all it takes is for him literally to have another 20-point week, and then he's right back at it.
See, I disagree because we were talking about him as being in the same class as CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy. And one of us was saying Justin Jefferson is better than both of those guys or could be better, and you'd rather have that guy. This week to me affirms even more. Like against a team that they were competitive with the whole game and were actually behind at behind at one point against Seattle. Still only target him 5 times. Like I don't know. I don't think we can compare him to CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy.
I mean, I still stand by that. I mean, Jerry Jeudy didn't play this week, but before this, he's been really consistent with Justin Jefferson. And this week isn't like a complete. I mean, he still had 5 targets. 5 targets isn't that bad. Like, I don't know. CeeDee Lamb is obviously proving to be a different beast. And if this happens one more week, then sure, I'll say CeeDee Lamb is better. But like Jerry Jeudy, in my opinion, has proved nothing more than Justin Jefferson has.
So this is a dollar bet.
That
CeeDee Lamb versus Justin Jefferson.
No, but I'll take Jeudy versus Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, because I just don't like Justin. I'll take it.
Just do it. Also, there is the fact that you got to take weather effects into consideration here. It was raining hard.
Yeah, but
the
Thielen
entire
still had a
game.
good game.
Yeah, you can have a good game, but you're traditionally not going to have as much passing as you will running, which is what the Vikings just did. Plus, I actually do think there is something to be said about the Vikings being up for majority of the game and then running with that.
Yeah.
And that versus where I see them going in the future is like look at next week against Atlanta. They're going to be with Delvin Cook injured now. I think they're going to be passing the ball a lot more because they're going to be down. I mean, you have Atlanta. I think they might be down against Green Bay. They'll be down against. It's not maybe until Detroit and Chicago that all of a sudden the running game comes back. So if Jefferson truly has like another 5.3 week against Atlanta, then I'm more willing to agree with you.
Yeah, I want to eat my words, but I also, as I feel like I'm not doing my press diligence on this podcast without bringing down the expectations of Vikings fans in this area. So,
I get it. I've said I think all three of them are in the same tier between Jefferson, Judy,
and Lamb.
Yeah. So I would just personally, I would like to have Jefferson over there too.
Sure, understandable. So that's Matt's team. Yeah, he's still definitely a playoff team. He moves into some record and some other record. Why am I even saying that again? Matt Trujillo's team. We have Josh Allen is so surprising. And I think last week we officially signed that contract of saying, yes, we hereby agree that he is a fantasy stud. He runs the ball. He throws the ball. He does a great job. And then we have Darren Waller, who they just keep feeding him over and over again. And John Gruden is just, I mean, he's to me, Darren Waller is just an interesting story because he came out of truly nowhere relative to the other studs in the tight end position. They're at least like drafted, whereas Darren Waller is just, I'm pretty sure he was undrafted and then dropped several times and actually didn't play for a couple of years and was addicted to drugs and all that. So, so who are we more interested in, and who are we more surprised in, Allen or Waller?
This year, I'd say Allen. Overall, I'd say Waller probably, but like I think Allen is just kind of. I wasn't completely sold on him coming into this year, but to me, he's proven it that he really is a truly elite fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that. I think Waller last year had shown flashes what he was doing this year, and people probably thought it would actually continue more and more. I mean, towards the end of the year, he had actually been kind of doing this, so the fact that it carried over in the next year might not have been a huge surprise to some people. But Josh Allen's passing ability is the difference here. Like, completely the difference. Yeah.
I definitely agree. I didn't expect Josh Allen to do this well as what he's been doing, and it's consistent. I mean, he is just he's not just a fantasy quarterback. I mean, he's a good quarterback, and that's exactly what the Bills needed, and it's really exciting to see them finally be at the end of their rebuild. They are a playoff team, and I'd love to see them make a deep run. So that's very interesting. Some duds here. J.K. Dobbins and Golden Tate especially, too. I mean, we're looking at a situation where Golden Tate, to me, is the clear wide receiver 2 in that offense. And that is the New York Giants. And J.K. Dobbins was maybe expected to take over the role from Mark Ingram and even Justice Hill and Gus Edwards. But I think we're a little bit surprised as the three of us that Justice Hill and especially Gus Edwards are still involved in that offense, even with respect to J.K. Dobbins. And Mark Ingram is still getting as many carries. So do you agree with me that Justice Hill might just be the more surprising dud?
J.K. Dobbins?
Or J.K. Dobbins, yep.
Yeah, to me, he probably is. I mean, he's drafted so highly and people thought so highly of him that I would have thought he would take over the backfield by now, and he just hasn't, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Who are you putting him up against?
Golden Tate.
I'm gonna actually say Golden Tate is to me more disappointing. I mean, he's consistently been around wide receiver. I mean, 45 and then 30 the year before that, so kind of within that range. He's number 76 right now, and I actually just thought he'd be a PPR target enough for Daniel Jones to go to. I think it kind of goes in relation to that. Like, he's just getting no yards after his catch at all, which I guess is to be expected. The J.K. Dobbins one, I guess I shouldn't say I'm not surprised, but I get it. Mark Ingram was still a good running back. He ran for a ton of the yards last year. There's no reason to get rid of him, and he's having another successful season, which I thought Dobbins would be good, but I thought it wouldn't happen until Ingram left.
Yeah, I guess I am more just my gut leans for saying I'm more surprised that J.K. Dobbins is a dud, because I thought what was going to happen was J.K. Dobbins was going to end up being the RB1 on that team by far, and Ingram was going to get old, and they're going to start using him. And I just thought Justice Hill and Gus Edwards were going to fall to the weight side, or maybe be like a slight like RB2, 3, 4 committee. But that hasn't happened at all. Like J.K. Dobbins is not being utilized.
Justice Hill is basically fantasy irrelevant. I want to make that almost a point because as a person owning him, I think he's maybe gotten 1 carry this year. Maybe.
Yes, that's true. But it's more just surprising that Gus Edwards is still involved, like to the degree with they have 3 running backs on that team.
Yeah, I think that's just. I think what they've shown though through years past is that it probably could have been predicted more that this was going to occur. We just didn't look at the signs.
Maybe
the fact that like they've always kind of had this. I mean, I always thought Ingram was clearly better than Gus Edwards, and then they still gave Gus Edwards a ton of carries. And then like even last year, what I'm referring to is that.
I thought that we saw Golden Tate's decline starting at the end of last year, so I could have seen that projected into this year. I was more optimistic about J.K. Dobbins.
Sure. I think that's fair. I think to me, I felt that Golden Tate kind of had a certain floor to him that I didn't think would be surpassed, and he surpassed that in a negative way.
Okay, that's reasonable. That's it. That's our studs, duds, and you need to stop being so crud segment. That finishes it out. And we were going to do some power rankings, but in reference to how long we've talked about this, which has been awesome discussions, let's move on to just talking about next week's matchups. So it will be week number 6, and next week we will be talking about our power rankings update with a little bit more 2 weeks in between, I think is more healthy. And with that too, we'll maybe dive deep more into some weaker positions of the teams in the power rankings. But right away, starting at the top, since this is my sleeper homepage, we'll talk about my team, Team Brumba, Team I'm the Best versus Marcus's team. Who you got?
Yeah, I'm going to go with your team on this one. At first glance, doesn't look like too many buys for either team. You have Derek, or you have Hunter Henry on buy, but other than that, I think you should be fine. I have you by about 20 points.
Ooh, that's good. Okay.
Wow. Yeah, I don't have him by an official point count yet. I think but I do have you winning for sure. I mean, the fact that Josh Jacobs, Chris Carson, and Justin Herbert are all on buys for him, I think that should be a pretty easy win for you.
All right. So are we doing 50 cents on these? Are we doing betting on these?
Should we just say most accurate wins $5 from least accurate?
Yeah, sure. I like that.
That works for me.
All right.
Throughout the entire season?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So I'm just going to real quick jot this down while everyone watches me down. But we've got everyone for Tom on this matchup. So then we have Laramie versus Adam's team. This is actually a lot closer in projections. So who you got?
This is a tough one. I need a second for this one. Cody, do you know?
Off the top of my head, no. If I'm going strictly off projections, it's going to clearly be Laramie because he's already projected to win and has a bye player in there. Not bias in, sexual orientation, but bias in he's not actually supposed to be in this week. Am I canceled yet? I suppose Adam also has a bye player.
Laramie's my boy, but I'll take Adam on this one.
I don't even care about projections. I just like Adam's team more, so I'm going to take Adam's team.
I'll take Laramie. I'll go against the norm.
The grain, otherwise
yeah,
we're all
why
agreeing.
not? Screw it.
No, don't say why not. Have conviction.
Yeah, Laramie. You know what? I can't actually vote against Laramie anymore. Like he showed us up this last time.
Should have defended
He commented.
Originally.
I'm defending him now. Laramie, I'm here for you. If you're still listening now, I'm here for you, buddy. You're gonna win.
I love it. So let's talk about Sam and Jake's team. Sam with 171 currently projected, and Jake with 164.
I'll take my team.
Yeah.
I think that actually is really, really close. I think this is going to be by far the best chance I have of losing all season, but I'll still take my team.
Yeah, me too. Not that it's a huge downfall, but Le'Veon Bell isn't playing against Miami this week because obviously he's not playing anymore, so he has to probably go back to Melvin Gordon against New England. I'm taking Sam. Not that I think that would have adjusted it or changed it anyways.
Yeah, I was the entire time you guys were talking was trying to find reasons why I would take Obi, but to me, yeah, I mean Le'Veon Bell already wasn't really starting on Jake's team, but to your point, that actually is a huge matchup for him. Melvin Gordon getting shut down, in my opinion, by New England is the highest estimate. But you have 2 handcuffs starting Sam, so that kind of sucks. But at the same time,
it's going to be a tough week, I think.
All right, so we're all saying Sam. We all agree.
Yep.
This is wonderful. Here on the Midwest Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast, we agree sometimes. Most of the time, actually, relative to this year.
But when we don't agree, we really don't agree.
That's true. Exactly. That's our brand.
Go Laramie.
All right. So we have Cody versus Eric. Who do we have?
It's Eric.
I'm going to go with Eric on
Yeah.
this one.
I'm not even going to defend a reason. It's Eric.
It's funny because moving into bye season for Cody is the coldest winter that Cody can experience because you have no one to start in your buys. You have no depth. So,
Yeah, it's perfect for my team. This is what I wanted.
it's true.
Just you wait.
The 0-12 dream lives
Just wait
on.
2 years. I am the Jets.
You are the Jets. But are you going to hire Adam Gase as your head coach?
No, I would quit the league. If I wouldn't. I actually would not trust that guy to even manage a fantasy football team I own.
Wow.
Wow. We should reach out to him and see if he'll join the podcast.
I mean, he'll need to pretty soon for any kind of... Never mind.
He'll have nothing else to do.
Yeah.
All right, we have Matt versus Mike this week. This one's close too, I think. Who you guys got?
He's missing a wide receiver. I'll take Matt. I'll take Matt all day.
Yep, me too. Also, I mean, we'll see if Chris Godwin actually does come back. I know he's projected to come back, but you never know.
What if Claypool has 4 touchdowns again?
I would still take Matt. maybe not.
Tom, go against the grain.
If you guaranteed me 4 touchdowns,
have conviction.
I might take Mike.
You know, looking at his team, I don't really see a great backup wide receiver for Matt Magnuson.
He'll put in Darnell Mooney, who actually is reasonably okay.
I was going to say Justin Jefferson. Question.
He's already starting.
Yeah, you're starting him, so.
Stephon Diggs, who's currently in his flex.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, but then he'd have to replace him with a flex option.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then he has like Philip
Singletary,
Lindsay and
Singletary, Jarek McKinnon.
I can't go against the grain, man. I got to go with Matt. This is for my reputation as a fantasy analyst.
What reputation?
Yeah. God, are you guys actually going to have the same picks? You guys
Just
suck.
chalk.
I did it first. You guys are copying me.
Nuh-uh. I didn't. I picked Laramie. I picked a different pick.
All right, so we've got Matt's team versus Ben Fowler's team. Any surprises here?
No, Matt wins it. Not without Dak Prescott, unless he makes a trade.
Yeah. Without Dak, that's pretty much done. Yeah.
With Dak, it was actually closer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll take Trujillo. With Dak, it actually.
Yeah. Also, he is missing DK Metcalf this week too for Ben Fowler. So it's like without Dak and DK. Yeah, I think it's pretty easily gonna be Matt.
Yeah, I hate to see it.
Yeah, I hate to see it for sure.
And to close out the best segment of all segments, because, you know, really inspires a lot of positive discussion about the matchups.
Yeah, right.
We have everyone agrees, and it's all chalk except for one person. Cody said Laramie will beat Adam.
God,
so that's the matchup of the week next
not
week.
a whole lot of good matchups next week. I feel like we need some of the bigger matchups, like Cody versus Mike, or like me versus you, or me versus Trujillo,
I mean,
or like Matt versus O'Brien, or
I don't mean
some
to get
big
you excited,
matchup.
but that's next week's next week's matchup. In week 7 is me versus Mike. Watch out for that.
It's gonna be intense.
It will be intense. And with that, we hope that you had an intense time listening to this podcast. Here with Cody and Sam and myself, Tom Bramba. Thanks for listening to the Midwest Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast. Peace out. It's a football podcast with Tom, Cody, and Sam.